All right. Happy Friday, everybody. It has been a weird week, but welcome back to another future-focused live Q&A. I've got, today I'm talking about, I've got three different things. I'm going to do my usual Q&A. I've got some questions that I've curated from my community that I'll be talking through. And if you don't know, I've got a podcast and a Substack, so go ahead and check that out. I'm multi-streaming. So also I'm live. This actually is live. It's not pre-recorded. So if you have questions too, feel free to ask. I'll take them as we go. But it's been a weird week. And so, one of the things that I'm going to be talking about, one of the biggest brands in the world, released an AI commercial that looks like a bit of a fever dream. The CEO of OpenAI recently made some claims that you cannot raise children without a chatbot. And a massive new safety report on artificial intelligence from the Future of Life Institute is claiming how unsafe we really are with what we're doing with this. So we're going to break these things down like I always do. I'm going to just do a brief overview. This isn't designed to be a commentary on necessarily the situations themselves, but to ask the follow-up questions, the deeper questions that people have as it relates to this. Because I want to bring this together through a leadership perspective and a business perspective, because this really, as much as it's presented as a problem with technology, it's really a people problem as we look at this. So like I said, I am live. So feel free to say hello or ask questions as we go. My goal is to make sure you get value out of these Friday conversations. And so if you get value, like it, share it, subscribe, follow, all those things on whatever platform you're joining me from, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube or Substack. And share it with somebody who'd benefit from it. And if it helps you out and you go, boy, I'd like to buy you a coffee. Well, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/ChristopherLand and say thanks. But with that, let's get into it. So I'm going to go through each of the three, and I've got three questions that I've curated. Now, the first one has to do with this McDonald's AI ad. If you haven't seen this blow up on the internet, McDonald's is getting absolutely roasted for this commercial that they released. It was for McDonald's Netherlands. And I've watched the commercial. I have mixed feelings on it. It looks about like what you would expect from an AI generated commercial. It's very short clips. There's not a whole lot of smooth transitioning. It is funny. I mean, it's a funny commercial, but it's got all the flavors of an AI generated commercial. Not to mention it's got a big old AI generated by AI link down on the bottom, which I think in many ways is part of the controversy behind it. And the internet went crazy over it. They completely flipped out about this McDonald's AI generated commercial. And for some good reasons, I think some is probably just more, it's cool right now to hate on AI. If you use AI for anything, everybody's going to dog on you. But so the first question I got related to this is, and I think it's a really important one, which is somebody asked me, why is it with this that we're so quick to blame AI? Because the controversy was fierce. Like almost immediately when this commercial hit the airwaves, people were absolutely livid over this McDonald's AI generated commercial. And if you watch the commercial, I mean, it's not a banger. You're not like, wow, this is the greatest commercial ever, but it's funny. The song is like, it's the worst time of the year. And of course, the happy ending is you go to McDonald's on Christmas. Kind of sad, like the dystopian world we live in. But it does some funny things in it and all this other stuff. And unfortunately, everybody's dogging on the AI, which there is some legitimate stuff to dog on when you look at it. But everybody's quick to blame AI, like, AI did this. And so the question was like, why do we do that? Because this person, and I know them, was like, at the end of the day, didn't somebody have to approve this? Like real people were involved. And I looked into it, and some of the defense coming from McDonald's was the fact there were teams of people that worked on this for months. This idea that you just like ask AI, hey, make a McDonald's ad, and it pops out a McDonald's ad on the other side. It's not the way it works. And so this person's like, why are we so quick to like blame AI? And so digging into it, it's a fair question, because at the end of the day, I would say this commercial isn't really AI's fault. If you want to be upset about it, be upset at the brand agency that put it together. Be upset at the senior leader who signed off on it and said, hey, yeah, I'm good with this. I know these are really choppy transitions, and boy, some of those movements look very AI. and all this other stuff. Be upset with that, but like AI itself, AI didn't do a bad job, at least of what it created for the most part. And I think the question of why are we so quick to do it? Personally, and I think this is a real problem. If you follow my writing and my other stuff, I'm going to be talking about it more next week, but you'll hear me talk about the fact that AI is really just a mirror for us. We don't like what we see in the mirror, but it doesn't make it any less of a mirror. And so I think some of the hate for AI that we see with this commercial is just our natural tendency. Like, we see something that we're afraid of, or we don't understand, or we don't like. And so we're quick to point fingers at it and yell at it and say, like, that's what's ruining the world. Now, there was some legitimate concerns from people about, like, there used to be teams of people that would go shoot this video and then edit this video and do all this stuff. Like, isn't this taking jobs? But if you really look at the way, even hearing back from McDonald's when I dug into it, it's like, no, there were still lots of people involved in the production of this commercial. They were doing different things, but they were still lots of people involved. So even the idea that this commercial is evidence that AI is stealing jobs, not that companies aren't making catastrophic mistakes. I do a ton of consulting to try and mitigate some of that risk. That they are. But it wasn't doing it the way it was represented. And really, a lot of the mistakes that you see in the commercial, you're like, well, that should have been caught by one of the people on the team. And I think this does lead to some of this pressure of like, well, we were part of the brand team and we had to prove we were using AI, so we did. And if you've ever tried to create video or images with AI, it's not real great at it. And the problem with it is, unlike when you create raw materials where you can work with it, you can edit it, you can refine it, with AI, you kind of can't. So I think some of the things you see are inherent to the tool. But again, that's a decision, whether that was a decision made by the leader over it, or whether it was a decision made by the team design. Like, at the end of the day, somebody was behind it. And I think that's why we're so quick to blame AI. Is it's really uncomfortable to take responsibility for things. It's really uncomfortable when we don't understand something and we don't like what we see. So we're quick to just go, that is bad, or that is, the problem, instead of going, well, I mean, not really. It contributed to it. I say all the time, AI is an amplifier. So if you're making mistakes, if you're doing stupid stuff, AI is going to pour gasoline all over it. If you're trying not to deal with things and assume AI will just close the gap, it's gonna amplify that. And I think our unwillingness to deal with that is what we're seeing with this commercial and the response, both from McDonald's and their defense of it and the people throwing hate on it, where it's like, it seems to me like you just are hating it because you saw made by artificial intelligence. Because I laughed. I watched it. I was like, yeah, a few creepy things. Not my style of commercial. The idea that McDonald's is the apex of great Christmas is a little weird and dystopian. But like, I don't know. I've seen worse commercials that were generated by humans. So was AI really the problem, or was the whole concept and the execution of it the problem? I'd argue it's the latter, but a lot of times we don't want to accept that, because if we're the viewer and we're watching it, then the same is true for us. And some of the things that AI screws up, wasn't AI screwing it up. It was our bad decision making. It was our choice to use it for something that maybe we shouldn't have. It was our choice to not review or edit what we had AI do. And, if you make a crappy post or send an email and you left the thing that says, here's your blah, 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 how does this feel? Well, whose fault is that? It's not AI's fault. That's yours. So I think that's really what my thought is on, like, why are we so quick to blame AI? And I see that consistently in the consulting work I do. I get called in a lot when AI sends things off the rails. And it's like, well, it wasn't really AI. It was broken processes. It was a lack of accountability. It was poor leadership. It was an unwillingness to develop and grow the talent that you have in your team. Those are the things I consistently run into. So there you go. So number two that came related to this was, does this commercial prove that companies are currently willing to trade their brand's reputation for the speed and cheapness of generative AI? And I know where this one's coming from. It's kind of coming from this thing of, we keep seeing examples of this, and I've seen it, I don't know how many times in 2025. my article for next week has to do with how 2025 has been a year of go fast and break things, and it hasn't been pretty. And so there is legitimate concern as we watch company after company, brand, even influencers now are like, influencers, celebrities, they're using AI to put out pure garbage. And it does leave you kind of going, is this really, like, is this evidence? Is this where we're going? Like, is this just the future? Just pure slop and trash? I actually would say no. And maybe at first it looks like that. And I think that might be some of the visceral reactions you see to the commercial. It's just this validation of, great, here we go. All the production team gone, no jobs. We're putting garbage commercials out. Thanks a lot, artificial intelligence. But I actually think McDonald's response to it was actually revealing of the fact that I actually think there's more of a bright future ahead than we really acknowledge sometimes. I mean, again, one, people clearly are not okay with AI slop. They're not. People are not fine with absolute garbage. Maybe there's a lot of it on the internet, but if in terms of like the stuff we actually gravitate towards and believe to be good, it's usually not AI junk. And then you look at McDonald's response and they're like, we didn't just do a one-shot prompt and output this. We spent months working with this. We had teams of specialists that worked on it. Well, yeah, we're in this like tweenage age of AI where we're still figuring out like, how does it work? And the models keep changing and things that used to work don't work. And people still don't really have the skills. It's why I do so much of the consulting work I do in helping people develop AI skills, because it is messy. So some of it was kind of the growth and McDonald's own vulnerability in saying, yeah, we're learning. Obviously, y'all didn't like it. Point taken. They took the commercial down. That's a ton of money they blew on something that they're probably going to think twice before just throwing out an AI commercial. I mean, so in many ways, I actually think the response, while the commercial being released may have given this impression that like we're doomed to a world of AI garbage, I actually think the response from McDonald's and just people in general is actually a really encouraging statement about the fact that I don't think we're going to move into a completely artificial world. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to. There's going to be lots of situations where it does, but it's not going to crush the human spirit the way that that I think a lot of people are interpreting things. So if anything, I actually was encouraged by the whole thing and I got a good laugh out of it. Go look up the McDonald's AI commercial. It's all over the internet. You'll get a kick out of it. So the third question that came up related to this was, in a world where good enough is becoming the default, how do leaders enforce a standard of quality that refuses to let technology lower the bar? It's a good question. I think the first part that I would add to this that comes off the heels of the previous question is that I don't think we are in a world where good enough is becoming the default. It seems like it right now. I get that. And there are many days I'm like, even myself, I look at stuff and go, we can do so much better. And it seems like nobody cares. I'm talking to somebody today about the fact that it's like doing a crypto scam and a rug pull is like common practice now. It's kind of disgusting in many ways when you look around at how CoffeeZilla, one of my favorite YouTubers, his whole brand right now is crime is legal. And it does feel like that right now. It feels like good enough, mediocrity is the status quo. And yeah, I think it looks like that. But then I also see lots of examples where that's not the case. And I'm, genuinely encouraged by that. I'm genuinely encouraged by the fact that I don't think that's where we are. So I think that would be kind of my first pushback to this question of, is this where we're going? I don't think we are going there, but I think it goes back to the second half of the question, which is how do leaders enforce a standard of quality that refuses technology to lower the bar? And I think that goes back to right now, leaders need to do a better job of holding the line. And I think there's a lot of pressure to just give in. I think this commercial was an example of that, where there probably was just pressure to, use AI to make your commercial, and maybe a different leader would have gone, no, that's stupid. We're not going to do that. Maybe they didn't have a choice. Maybe they only had that much of a budget. And maybe the leader did an intentional strategic decision to go, we're going to put a subpar commercial out there because they didn't give us the budget they normally did because they believe AI can do magic and it can't. So maybe this blowback will work in their favor because they'll be able to go back to their leadership team and go, that's what you get. You wanted us to do AI. You only gave us this many dollars. So we did it. And now you've got a controversy on your hands. I don't know, but I think this is where leaders have a really unique opportunity right now to not give into it, but get creative. I think right now what I see a lot of times is people see this kind of false dichotomy. Do we either give into the status quo, good enough, AI slop, or do we hold the line and cling to what we've always done? And I truly feel like that's a false dichotomy that you don't need to lean into. And you can say, yeah, like, let's find the middle ground. And that middle ground is going to look different for everybody. And I think that's really the opportunity leaders have right now. If you're defending the status quo and the status quo is garbage, you're cooked. You're cooked right now. Like, if you're a leader who won't objectively look at your teams or, what your teams are producing or what you're being held accountable, if you won't objectively look at it, and actually see if it's can be improved upon, well, that's on you. But at the same time, I don't think the only other option is just to sit back and let AI roll over you and say, well, I guess that's all we can do. I think we can do better than that. So anyway, that's this first one. Again, it's all related to this McDonald's commercial. I do see some of the comments coming in. I don't even acknowledge comments that have nothing to do with the topic I'm talking about. So if you're wondering why I'm not responding to some of the ones coming in, as the old saying goes, don't feed the trolls. So I won't. Okay. So number two that came in, the topic I wanted to talk about, Sam Altman. All right. He's on record now. And this week, I think it was this week, talked about the fact that, parents will not be, he commented on caring for a baby, which, having children is a big thing. I'm a dad to eight kids under the age of 15. So like fatherhood's a big deal to me. And so this one caught my attention because Altman, who I don't even know if he has kids. So it's always interesting to me when people who either don't have kids or have like one have this knowledge and wisdom on what it means to raise children. But anyway, he's quoted as saying, like, it will be impossible. It'll be impossible to raise children without ChatGPT. I audibly laughed when I heard it and was like, you have got to be kidding. We've been raising children for millennia, thousands of years, and you're going to make a statement that you can't raise kids without ChatGPT? Like, give me a break. But he framed this as a necessary assistant for the modern parent. Like, you can't function as a parent if you don't have ChatGPT. And as you can imagine, it sparked debate left and right as people are like, are you serious right now? Like, as if parents don't have enough to deal with. Now you're going to have to say they have to use ChatGPT or they ain't going to make it. Which, by the way, this is coming from Altman, who is literally clinging to OpenAI's. I don't think they're going to disappear. I talked about it last week on the live stream. I don't think they're going to disappear, but I mean, he is losing his lead in terms of the AI leader. I know he just pushed out a new GPT model that is supposed to be the latest and the greatest and better than everything. They don't have a reputation of it. I canceled my premium subscription. I moved over to Gemini. Like, OpenAI is not doing great. And, that's not a sudden decision. That's a series of really bad decisions and choices they've made along the way. But anyway, so he has a lot of incentive to tell parents, you're not going to make it if you don't have ChatGPT. But to me, again, the question, one of the questions comes in is like, are we losing touch with basic human instincts? And it's like, I don't think real people are. I think there's pressure. There's this FOMO that like, yeah, this is what you got to do, type of a thing. But so the first question, let me get into the first question, because that's context for this thing. Sam Altman, who I don't know that anybody would even trust him to watch their kids, has a strong opinion on how to raise kids, and it requires his product. How convenient, right? How convenient for that. But he says, it's impossible. without AI. And so the question came to me, and I know this person, and they were curious my thoughts as a dad to 8 young kids. Is AI helpful outsourcing, or are we actually eroding kind of this like parental intuition that, I mentioned we've been raising kids for millennia without chatbots. And here's what I'll say to this question. Like, is it, because it's kind of framed in this, is it good or bad? Like, is AI for parents bad or is it good? And again, I would say that's the wrong question to be asking. Because where there is some truth to what Sam says about, using ChatGPT as a parent, is there are some really helpful things that AI can help you do as a parent. It's a great tool to help you, find information. Or I've many times had it come up with a goofy story, and then we've made fun of it. I haven't read it to my kids like, this is a great story, but more like, hey, like, let's see how smart AI is this development release. So there's some fun things you can do with it. It's great for coming up with, we use it sometimes for like, hey, like, here's what we've got in the cabinets. Come up with a recipe that is kid friendly and healthy. And I mean, we could spend hours on the internet looking up a recipe, or we could just ask AI to do it. And then we all say, how was our AI dinner? And was it good or bad? Like, I don't know. So it's not that it's bad. Now, if you're trusting AI to make all your parenting decisions, I would say that's not going to go well for you. I don't think that's going to end in a good way. If you don't consult other parents, if you don't have any sort of grounding in, actually listening to your kids and talking to them and hearing their perspective on things, and you just go, well, AI told me, so therefore I don't really care. Like, yeah, that's not going to go well for you. I mean, if you trust AI that isn't sentient, is just a bunch of the collective average of everything on the internet to tell you how to raise kids, I mean, I would say that's not going to go well. So I think it just goes back to, and one of the things, people always ask me, Christopher, what should I do? And I will tell you right now, if you ever get the chance to talk to me one-on-one, you will find I've developed a growing allergy to "you should" on things, because I'm not you, and I don't know your circumstances, and I don't know your situation. And so you're not going to find me telling you as a parent, this is exactly what you should use AI for and what you shouldn't. I can give you some guiding principles. I can tell you some things you got to watch out for. I can tell you some areas that, are going to be highly risky if you toy around with it. But in terms of the specifics of what exactly the role AI should play in parenting for you, that's something you're going to have to wrestle through. And so, that's where, is it helpful? Is it bad? Like, no. And do I think there are going to be people that do it? There already are. There are already people who are trusting AI on all their child rearing decisions. And I'm like, let me know how that goes for you. I know how this, yeah, that one is a 6-7 right there. There's a comment I'll acknowledge on that one, because the whole "should AI parent your children" conversation is a bit of a 6-7 one. But again, where it fits and what it looks like, I think that's something every parent needs to wrestle with. But it has to be wrestled with critical thinking and in community with other people and in talking through really hard things. It's not, you're not going to find the answer to that question by looking up top 10 parenting tips for AI. Like, what are the 20 hottest prompts for parents in 2026? Like, really? That's not going to get you where you need to go. So that would be my response to, is AI parenting gonna, destroy humanity? Well, for some people, it might. For some people it might, but I don't think inherently that's, I don't think that's the path that we're on. So to the question, do I believe in God? Yes, I do. I talk about faith a ton on my Substack. It's a huge part of my life. Okay. So the question 2 related to this, here's the dad of 8 perspective. So parenting is 90% chaos and improvision. This is what this person said. Can an LLM ever actually prepare you for the reality of a toddler meltdown, or is it just a false confidence? It's a really good question on this one. Yes. Well, to the question in the YouTube comments, yes. So here's the thing. Parenting is 90% chaos and improvisation. I think there's a lot of truth in that there is a lot of unpredictability. As a dad to 8, my life is there's no 2 days that are ever the same. But what I wouldn't want to represent it as is like there's no consistency. And to anybody who doesn't have kids or is thinking about having kids, this idea that having kids is just this constant treadmill of the unknown where you're just like running around figuring it out, not really. And I will say my faith background plays a large role in that. I think there are some things, the wisdom of Ecclesiastes, that it's just like there's nothing new under the sun. Like there are certain things that are just timeless. Now, how they show up, the different flavors of it, yes, that's where the improvisation comes in. There's no like playbook of every single situation, here's what to do. But the timeless wisdom of, well, these are things we know to be true and they just don't change. Or this is, certain. So I would push back a bit on the fact that parenting is 90% chaos and improv. No, there is some real consistency, some things that as parents, you just know, like, hey, this is how it works. These are things you don't want to tread into. This is areas that's going to be dangerous. But like you're not going to find a parenting book from 10 years ago that told you how to deal with kids who, are asking if they can get a smartphone. It wasn't there. So, but the question of, can an LLM prepare you for the reality of a toddler meltdown? Yes and no. And I think this goes back to, am I going to say never talk to, if your kid's having a meltdown or it's a consistent problem as a parent, don't use ChatGPT because it's going to steer you wrong. Well, no, but that can't be your primary source. Like if you have no other friends that are parents and you have no foundation of what's right and wrong and no moral framework for things, then an LLM is going to be dangerous because, like I say all the time, AI is just the collective average of all the garbage on the internet, which you average out all the garbage on the internet. There's some really brilliant stuff. There's some really terrible stuff. So you average that out, it's not going to be great. But can it be helpful if you're in the middle of trying to figure out, like, what are some creative ideas that I can experiment with? And then you put a layer of critical thinking and an analysis on top of it. Yeah, I mean, it can give you some helpful stuff. Like if you're really stuck in a situation, would it be great if you always had a friend you could call? Sure, but that's not always practical. So can Gen AI be helpful to bounce ideas off of? Am I crazy? Do other parents experience this? Like, what are some things that I can be thinking about? I think the key is not to look for it for answers, like the final answer, but look for it for ideas, for suggestions, and then filter that through the lens of, okay, is this true? Does this match my, moral framework? Do I find that I've seen this, is this based in evidence or is this complete cockamamie? I mean, you can go to Reddit and ask how to be a parent and you might get some good advice. You might get some terrible advice. So I think sometimes we're quick to see AI as either good or bad. And it's like, well, you can make stupid decisions. You might have a friend who you call all the time when you run into parenting problems, and they're a terrible parent and they're terrible at giving advice. So in that case, LLMs would be a better option. If you have a really grounded person who's had a bunch of kids and has seen it all, well, they're a better option than an LLM. I mean, I think that's where everybody's situation is different. It's just about knowing how to approach it. So, I mean, can it give you false confidence to the last part of the question? Yes. It's a sycophant. Like, it's a sycophant that will tell you, all right, for this one, for you, chicken dude, I will do it. So, hey, Nick, or happy birthday. There you go. I hope you have an awesome day. Birthdays are amazing. Enjoy your day, man. And so here's another one. I'll pull this one up on screen because I think it's great. I think that's awesome that you're a parent of a Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And yes, I think AI absolutely can be helpful in getting practical perspectives. It can. I think the part that I was getting to before the birthday shout out was the fact that, can it give you false confidence? It absolutely can. Okay. It absolutely can. It is a sycophant. It tells you what you want to hear. It tells you your ideas are wonderful. It tells you you're the smartest person on the planet. Like, So if you really push AI to tell you your bad idea, it's going to say it's great. So yeah, it can give you false confidence, and then you're going to hit your head against the wall. And again, if you're putting your trust in AI, that's not going to go well for you. Okay. That's not going to go well for you. Somebody asked earlier, if I have faith in God, I do. And so my faith is in something bigger than a giant large language model that's based on the whole of the garbage on the internet. Because it's not going to last. Okay. So number 3, so raising kids in the age of answers. Oh, really? I'll have to check that one out. Noah Khan made a song about the false confidence. I'll check that one out. Okay, so raising kids in the age of AI. So the third one was, if our kids grow up on a machine that answers every question instantly, how do we teach them the value of struggle, patience, and figuring things out on their own? It's a really good question, and one of my big concerns as I watch what I would call the age of immediacy continue to rise. Our patience level is just dwindling. Like, we wait for 30 seconds and we're pissed off because how dare I have to wait? Like, I think back when the internet first started, you waited 2 hours to download a single song. Now, if your Pandora or Spotify's buffering for 2 seconds, you throw your phone across the room. And so we are raising a generation that, if we're not careful, will grow up around this idea that faster and more is always better. And so, I think when it comes to how do we teach them the value of this, going back to something I said earlier in the live stream, one of the things that we often don't want to do is actually look in the mirror as parents. And I talk a lot about the fact that one of the most important things you can do is look objectively in the mirror and see what's looking back at you. And so I see frequently parents raising concerns about how this new generation is going to grow up and what they're going to be like. And then I go, yeah, well, what are you modeling for them as a parent? Do you throw a tantrum when Amazon is delayed a day with your Amazon order? Do you flip out at your Instacart driver because they spilled something, when they brought it to your, are you modeling that? Do you flip out when ChatGPT goes down or when Amazon Web Services goes down and you can't get your work done? Are you throwing a tantrum in your home office or at the office and your kids are watching you do that going, okay, well, I guess this is normal. And those are hard questions that a lot of times we don't want to, are your kids seeing you go to ChatGPT instantly for everything instead of, are you modeling patience? Are you modeling struggle? Are you actually wrestling through these things? If not, it's a bit unrealistic and unreasonable to think that you can ask your kids, you need to learn this, but I don't. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to actually get into it. And I think that's one of the things that, is a real problem right now, is that a lot of times we want everybody else to do the things that we're unwilling to do ourselves. And so as I look at this, kids growing up with a machine, first of all, if you're a parent, you have a heavy influence whether your kids are going to a machine and getting their questions answered instantly. And I'll give you a perfect example with my son the other day, because he's got this totally tamed down version of AI that just, it lets him kind of experiment with, basic stuff. And the other day he came to me and he was so excited to tell me about this, the biggest train in the world. And he told me the thing and he's explaining the dimensions. And I said to him, I go, I want you to, in your head, actually picture how big that train is. And he started doing, and you could just see the wheels start to turn as he starts processing. And I will get to your question, Erden. As he starts going, well, yeah, oh yeah. Well, now that I'm thinking about that, that's bigger than a shopping mall. And I'm like, yeah, do you really think that? How about this? Go ask your AI model, just say, I don't think that's correct. And he comes back up very sheepishly and he's like, you're right, Dad. AI admitted it, made it up. It was a thing from a story, which again, I hate when people say hallucinations. AI is not hallucinating. It's not making anything up. It's pulling from something it was trained on and recompiling it based on what it thinks you want to hear. Okay. So it's not hallucinating. And that's exactly what happened with this. We ended up looking up what this actual train was. It originally told him was the biggest train in the world. It just happened to be from a fiction book. Like it's like, oh, okay. So like it is a train. It is real in the sense like it's real, like an actual thing that exists in our consciousness, but it's not real as in like somebody actually built this train, out there. And I think that's one of the things where I've found with my kids, one of the best ways to kind of push against some of this, like letting AI do their thinking for them and them, having to figure things out. I ask lots of really good questions. We engage in discussion. We don't just react to the things we see. We talk about it. I listen to them. I take their perspectives in. We wrestle through things together. I share with them things I'm dealing with, when it comes to work or things like that. And I invite them into that. And that's where I would say as a parent, if you're concerned about what AI might do to your kids, AI doesn't do anything on its own. It does what we allow it to do to us. And as a parent, you have a responsibility to your kids. And if you don't take that responsibility seriously, and you're not taking your responsibility with AI seriously, that is exactly the example you're setting for your kids. And it's easy to go, well, the school does it, or big tech does it, or the toy industry does it. And it's like, yeah, but who's really the one who's guardians over their children? It's you. So not that it's 100% on you, but I feel like we're very quick to try and point the finger rather than actually wrestle with ourselves. Okay, so I will take this one because I actually do get this a lot, especially because I have 8 kids. So I actually had to look this one up, the antinatalism. And I was like, wait, what is that? So I did quick look this one up. And it has to do with this philosophical view that having children is morally wrong or unjustifiable because of the world we're living in right now. And, we're basically, it's this idea that it's wrong to have children because if you do, you're bringing them into a terrible world and setting them up for failure. So here's my nuanced take on this one, because I do understand where it comes from. I understand there's a lot of really bad crap going on in the world. There is a lot of really terrible things that you have to take into account. And being a parent is super scary. So I completely understand where this comes from. And here's the other thing I will say, and I'll be really clear on this. You will never hear me say to anyone, you should have kids, or you are morally obligated to have kids. You're a bad person if you don't have kids. Because going back to what I said earlier, I am growing an allergic reaction to telling other people what I think their lives should look like. So even though people go, you have 8 kids, I'm assuming you tell everybody that they should have tons of kids. No, I don't. I talk about what my experience has been like with a big family, how I never thought I was even going to have kids, and how I've had to wrestle through a lot of things. I'm honest about it, but I talk about the joys and the hardships of having kids. It's a very personal decision that everyone needs to take seriously for themselves. The idea, though, to go so far, just like I would say, I think it would be wrong to tell somebody it's morally wrong to not have kids. I think it's just as bad to tell somebody it's morally wrong to have kids and to say that it's a bad choice. And, can't you just look around at the world and, you're a bad person for bringing kids into this world? Because the reality is we tend to have this chronological snobbery where we think that the experience in the world we live in now is so much worse or so much different or so much like, if you actually look at history, it's been really bad in many, many, many times. And going back, I cite Ecclesiastes all the time, but Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. So sure, it's easy to look at the geopolitics of the world right now. It's easy to look at, AI and the future of where we're going. It's easy to look at the economic status of, the world and the inflation. Like, it's easy to look at all those things and go, see, it's terrible. Bringing kids into this world is a morally unjust thing. Well, but then you'd have to say that it always has been, because the world has always been a complete mess. And it always has. So then what? Should we never have kids? I mean, anybody who, if you actually do the mathematics on it, just look up South Korea and you'll quickly see like they're in a panic because they're like, oh my gosh, like we're not going to have a country anymore, because even families that have 2 kids, the population rate goes down. Because I grew up in a funeral home most people don't make it as old as they want. So like people die, and we don't like to deal with that, but people die. And so, it's one of those things where it's like, well, if everybody decides, and look at the China, one child thing and how that went. And so again, I'm not advocating so everybody not having kids or only having one kid or having less than two kids is bad. No, it's a very personal decision everybody has to make. But I wouldn't say it's wrong or bad. I have 8 and it's wonderful. I love my kids. I think it's great. I love the conversations, and I feel like I'm working really hard to prepare them for the crazy world that we're in. Yeah, it is going to be crazy. And it's been crazy to see, and it's going to be interesting, to your point, introspective mind. It's going to be interesting to see how they mature. And I'm fascinated to watch them grow. And it's been interesting. I have conversations with my older children now that I'm like, this is crazy. And, we talk about really hard things. So it's a bit of a deviation from the questions, but I hope that at least gives you some context that I don't, I think kids are wonderful. I will say, and I'll add this as kind of a final piece. I shared that I have a strong faith background, but even I speak openly about the fact that I think conservative culture tends to prop up family and children to a position that is not healthy. It idolizes it in a very unhealthy way. And so when I talk to people who are either opposed to having children or just really, really hesitant or on the fence about it, I very much understand where that comes from, and I'm very empathetic to it. And I very much shared that same feeling where I wrestled with it, and I really was like, is it even right for me to have kids? Type of thing. And honestly, I think God just kind of laughed and went, well, you're not going to have a choice in the matter, type of a thing. So I get it. I get it. And I think that's where I just tell people like, hey, this is just something you got to wrestle through and you got to work through and work through it in community with others and talk to other people who have wildly different perspectives. I love one of the best things I have done in life is surrounded myself with people who have wildly different views than I do, and listened to them and asked questions and sought to understand, not to convince them otherwise, not to argue with them, not to win a conversation, but to truly understand, like, hey, where are you coming from? And, seeing your comment, Erden, of like the anxiety and the level 1 autism, like I totally wrestle with that fear, and the fear of like, well, I might be terrible to my kids. I have a wild background. I shared many of your same fears and many of your same challenges. And so I completely get it. And again, if you choose to not, I'm not going to condemn you. I would say God's not up there going, how dare you not have children, right? I think that's something you need to wrestle through. And I totally understand where that comes from. And I wish more people, here's the thing. I wish more people put the thought and effort and just really wrestled and thought about these things. Not so much so you go, so do we or don't I? But if there are things that you got to deal with, sometimes you got to deal with things. There were things I had to deal with before I really started feeling comfortable having kids, and before I really was able to be excited and celebrate having a huge family. Like I was, good grief. I had kids in my first few kids. Like I was terrified. I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through. I have a very different attitude now than I did then. But I empathize with it. So, right. Like if nothing else, hopefully it just makes you think about it and wrestle through some of that stuff. And I can completely see where you're coming from. Let me just say that. So am I going to judge somebody because they have kids or don't have kids? No, it's far too much of a personal decision. Okay. So the third one, hey, we're on heavy topics. We're on heavy, intense topics. So we're talking about, if you haven't heard of Future of Life Institute, okay, I think they do 2 reports a year. They do a summer report and a winter report. And Future of Life Institute just released their AI safety report. Basically, they're like a watchdog that looks at AI safety. They look at, how the models are performing. They've got all these categories. They look at the major models. If you're curious more details about this one, next week I have a deep dive podcast on it, and I'm in the process of writing my Substack article on it, and I will probably create a whole bunch of content around it. So, I'll touch on it here, but I'm going to go much deeper with it. But basically, they're an independent organization that they don't just take AI companies at their word. Well, I'll put it that way. So if they say what we're doing is safe, Future of Life Institute is like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to take, trust me, bro. And so if you actually got into the report, it's 101 pages. Now the first 21 are really just where it's getting into the meat of, what is this and what conclusions did we come to and all this other stuff. But then there's like literally 80 pages of like the deep dive of like, what did they actually analyze? How did they come to the conclusions? And let's just say nobody's making the honor roll. Okay. The best grade was a C+ overall, which I guess C's get degrees, but I don't know that we necessarily want to be banking our humanity on a bunch of technology that at best is rated a C+ in the area of safety. And so I will talk a lot more about it, because I will say they're coming at it from a very unique lens. They're coming at a very unique lens in the terms of like, they're looking at it through existential safety. If we get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence, are we prepared for that? And I would say, no, we're not prepared for that. But I also don't know that we've even defined what those two things are. So, it's a little bit of this, like we're waiting for the Terminator when we aren't even sure what the Terminator looks like. But it's a really unique report. If you look at it, you're going to see a lot of red and orange on it because it didn't go great. And some of that depends on whether they're open source, whether they're not open source, if they're closed source, right? There's a lot of nuance and context to this. I did want to at least kick off this topic this week, because whenever these kind of safety reports come out, I already know there's going to be 90 bajillion social media posts and articles and all these things talking about how doomsday is right around the corner and AI is going to wipe out all of humanity. And, it contributes to what we were talking about before with this kind of like, anti-natalism type thing, where we're afraid of what the world is in the future. And are we even going to make it to 2030? And if you've seen Project 2027, you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to die in 3 years and AI is going to destroy us. And I don't think that's helpful. So I in my work, I try and tone that down and go like, let's actually think about this. But they did drop the report. And it does have this scoring system. It looks like a scorecard. And you can see, I think the 8 biggest, I had the image when I made my podcast this week. I don't have it on me right now, but I can't pull it up. But anyway, you can take a look at it. You'll see it. And they have their winter report. So question 1 that came through to me was, are reports like this focusing too heavily on the Terminator scenarios, causing us to miss the mundane bureaucratic risk that is actually affecting business today? Yes, yes, yes. And I don't inherently think that's bad. I think we just have to use that as a filter to understand what we're dealing with. And Erden, I don't know if you're talking to me or if you're talking to Introspective Mind, who's also been talking with you in the chat, but I've really enjoyed your dialogue. So feel free to hang around. I've enjoyed this. But so on this report, the question is like, are we too focused on the Terminator scenarios, and are reports like this the wrong reports to be having? I don't think they're the wrong reports to be having. Okay. I love what Future of Life Institute is doing. I think we need watchdogs who, especially given the fact that our current administration and just the tech industry at the whole is fighting globally to say we should have no regulations or no red lines for technology. We should be allowed to do whatever we want, however we want, and we'll clean up any messes later. And I think that's terrible. And if you study history at any point, we have a history of doing that in many things. And then we learn the hard way. One we're dealing with right now is social media. Like, we threw social media out into the world, and now we're dealing with existential crises that were completely, avoidable. So I appreciate the work of Future of Life. I love that we have people that are going, look, tech, you keep saying you're working towards AGI, and you're working towards ASI. So if that's what you're doing, then you probably should be held accountable for, are you putting in the safety guardrails? We need companies like Future of Life doing this, because I will tell you right now, if you are trusting OpenAI or Anthropic or Meta or Google to do any of that, they're not. They're not. There's not financial incentive for them to do it. There's not political incentive for them to do it. You know, the military complex is incentivizing them to do whatever it takes. The military complex from around the world is pushing them to do it. You know, the AI arms race is pouring jet fuel all over this. So we need people like the Future of Life Institute doing the work they do, and they need to help keep these things out of, you know, help hold them accountable. And here's the second half of this. I see business leaders and individuals time and time again get so distracted with these existential crises. And I am watching the comments too, so I'll probably chime in here in a minute. But people get so distracted with this, they actually miss the forest through the trees. And I see this in my consulting work all the time, where companies are doomsday planning over like whether AI agents are going to replace their entire workforce, when it's like, you just implemented, Copilot or Gemini, and you've got people like checking out and, you know, like not even doing, like they're letting AI do all their thinking for them. Like, you're worried about, I say this all the time, people are worried about whether AI is going to end humanity. And growing up in a funeral home, you're more statistically likely to die by slipping on the ice and cracking your skull. So like, we worry about the thing that's out there and feels big and is like out of our control, and we completely ignore the stuff that's like right in front of us. And I think that's one of the risks of Future of Life Institute Safety Index, is you can look at it and you can look at it and you can go, oh my goodness, like this is the end of the world, and this is how it's all going to go down. And I would say that's a miss. You know, should you look at it and go, yeah, we better keep a pulse on this. We should take that into accountability when it comes to, you know, voting for policies or voicing our opinions on things, the personal choices we make with which companies we're going to support or not support, our own personal decisions around AI usage. Like, yeah, you should be looking at that. You know, if you're, and I'll talk about this in the podcast and the article, you know, if you're trusting your company to use an open source AI model and you don't even have a dev team of specialists that understand AI, that's a mistake. Like, that's a mistake. But that's not a mistake because the FLI's safety index gave that company an F. That's a mistake because you don't have the resources to handle what you're dealing with. And I think that's where these safety indexes can sometimes blow things out of proportion, and it ends up being a distraction, which is what the question was. Like, does this risk us actually missing the opportunities or the risks we are dealing with AI in business in our lives today? Yes, it absolutely does. Way too many people are worried whether the Terminator or a swarm of drones is going to come to their house and blow up their neighborhood than whether their kids are trusting their AI model to, you know, answer all their questions rather than talking to their mom or their dad. Like, and I think we just need to do a bit of both and, which is why I say I love what Future of Life is doing. And we can't, you know, we can't take it all in one. We got to take it with a grain of salt. Okay. The other one, question 2, if this index suggests we are moving too fast, and this is, I think, a really important one. I talk about the analogy right now when I think about AI is like, the AI industry is building the top of the skyscraper. The rest of the world is still like letting the concrete dry on the foundation and the foundational floors. And it just keeps going up, and eventually this thing's going to collapse. So the index does reveal that the safety gap is continuing to grow. And so it suggests we're moving too fast. Yes, I agree with that. So their question was, how does a pragmatic leader hit the brakes without killing innovation? This is a question that I would probably spend, you know, hours on if I was, in a deep conversation with somebody of it, but I'll give some high level answers to leaders who may be trying to wrestle through this with their teams, or if you're a parent trying to wrestle through this with your kids, or like whatever situation you're in, everybody's wrestling with this right now. How to hit the brakes on some of the pace with AI without killing innovation is, I think there's two things. One, think critically before you do anything and think about the implications of the decisions you're making and how you're engaging with AI. Honestly, one of our biggest mistakes is we just don't think. We just do. And we're overconfident in our own abilities. We don't listen to other people. I mean, as a Christian, we don't, like, God literally tells us, hey, this is how it works. And we're like, yeah, I don't know. I think I know better. And it's like, are you serious? Like, we literally have history books that validate this stuff. But no, yeah, you're right. You've cracked the nut. Like, you get how it works. So we don't like to think. We don't like to listen. We don't like to challenge the idea that maybe I am wrong. Maybe what I'm doing is wrong. So I think one of it is, well, that's how you do it, is listen. I'll give three things. So one is just to accept that and acknowledge that. The second one is, I mentioned it earlier. One of the things I find most valuable is I have a very, very diverse group of people that I engage with and that I spend time with. And those of you who've been to my live streams before, you probably know I love when people who don't share my worldview at all, push back or ask questions. That's why the question about antinatalism, like, I love that stuff. It's like, yeah, let's talk about it. Like, let's have an honest conversation. Because when you have those diverse conversations with people with different perspectives who think differently, and you don't approach it, you're not actually learning anything. You're only reinforcing what you already think. And so I think that second piece is invite other people into the conversation and actually listen. Like, if somebody says something you don't like or agree with, don't just write it off. And I think that'll help you slow down, because it requires time to actually process that, without killing the innovation. But then the other one is, people get really defensive about this, the idea, and you see it all the time. If you make a post about AI regulation or AI, guardrails, people freak out. There's this idea that by having boundaries, you're somehow slowing innovation. And I actually think that's not true at all. And there's research to back this. People actually perform better if they know where the boundaries of things are. They feel more free to exercise, exploration and innovation inside those boundaries, because they know when they bump against the edges. When they have no idea where those edges are, they kind of freak out and they just stay where it's safe in their mind, where they feel safe, and they don't really move around. And that's not just Christopher's opinion. There's tons of research that supports this stuff. So the idea that boundaries and restrictions actually causes a lack of innovation is false. Now, granted, oppression is very different than healthy boundaries and healthy restrictions. And so when I say, how do you slow things down without completely killing innovation? Those first two things I talked about should drive you to then say, so where do we need to draw the lines? Where do we need to have them to make sure things don't go off the rails? And not that you never move those, but just so you bump into them and it slows you down before you just blast over them. Like, it just forces you to go, hang on, here's where we are. Are we good with this? Like, do we need to revisit this type of a thing? And then there's times where you have to say no. You have to go, no, like, we could do this and we're not going to. And I think that will help with this, because again, you're not going to change Google and DeepSeek and OpenAI and, Anthropic. Most likely they're going to end up doing some really, really terrible stuff. And it's going to get blown out of proportion, or not blown out of proportion. Some real people are going to get hurt, and the world is going to absolutely backlash this hardcore. And I think Peter Thiel is a perfect example of it with what he's doing with Palantir, like what they're doing with surveillance. Yeah, right. Just wait till people actually start getting wise to how these AI companies are using their data. And I mean, I just saw a video this week of somebody who had a visceral reaction to somebody who was walking around with those stupid meta glasses with AI recording everything that they're doing. Like, the person ripped them off their face and smashed them. And I'm not advocating that that's the right response. I'm just saying, as people start waking up to some of this stuff, it's going to come back to bite them. And so, but can we stop these big AI companies? I don't know. Maybe if we all bond together, I guess it's possible. But I think pragmatically, we just need to do these other steps to hopefully slow things down enough we don't get hurt and the people around us don't get hurt, and we control what's within our control. All right, last question, and then I'll wrap it up. So beyond the charts and risk scores, what's the single most practical step this report suggests we take right now to ensure we're building tools that help rather than harm? Oh, trying to distill it down to one practical step. Okay, so I'll frame it this way. It goes back to one of my fundamental principles around AI, which is AI doesn't do anything on its own. It does what it's instructed to do. And even if you go, nah, because see, these AI models do this and I didn't tell it to, you might not have told it to, but someone else did. Someone up the chain, someone who developed the algorithm, someone who was involved with setting the governance standards, someone at the top who decided whether we were going to use it for, I don't know if you've seen like how they're like, hey, this new AI tool can insert ads into like existing movies for product placement. And you're like, someone decided that was a good product idea and pitched it. Somewhere, some movie executive is going to go, I love it. Somewhere, some brand is going to decide they want to take advantage of that and get their product in front of people. Someone is doing something. So the single most pragmatic step everybody can take right now as they think about safety is, what am I actually doing? What are the things that I'm doing on a regular basis? And why am I doing it? And how am I thinking about it? And am I taking into account diverse perspectives and risks? And am I doing that? Because I think what I encounter when I talk to people is most people cannot answer that question yes. Most people, they give me a deer in headlights look. They're like, because we're so quick to wait for somebody else, to put the blame on somebody else, to push it off our lap, to throw the hot potato somewhere else. And so I actually think the single best step everybody can take is say, what am I actually doing? Why? Have I thought about it? Have I considered these things? Because if you do that, you will be more inclined to slow down. You will be more inclined to invite diverse perspectives. You will be more inclined to make wise decisions with AI, and you will be more inclined not to make decisions that end up causing real harm because you've talked to the people you would harm. And you go, you know what? I actually care about that person, and I don't want to see them get hurt. And I know now, based on talking to them, that, yeah, what I'm thinking of doing is actually going to cause harm, even though I didn't think about it that way. And so I think if we do that, yes, these reports, yes, these research papers, yes, these things can be helpful data points that we can use to help make decisions. But none of this data, none of this research, none of this anything makes a lick of difference if we aren't willing to actually think about the decisions we're making on a day-to-day basis. And most of the time we don't want to. We're too busy. We are too self-conscious. We're too insecure. We're too, like, whatever it is, it's not like, I don't know everybody who ends up watching this, what your hiccup is, what your speed bump is, but you have one. And our unwillingness to deal with this is really the core problem that if we all deal with, and personally, that's where, as a Christian, for me, that's what led me to be a Christian, was I finally went, oh yeah, I'm the mess. It's not everybody else who's the mess, it's me. And so I think that's probably, again, whether you come to my worldview or not, there's real benefit to having that realization and go, okay, problem starts with me. I can only do what I can control, which is the person who's looking back at me in the mirror. So that's where I'm going to start. And maybe it's not going to fix all these other problems, but at least I can go to bed at night going, I know I did everything I could to try and make the biggest impact that I can. And what a perfect example, and then I'll wrap up here. I talk a lot about the fact I grew up in a funeral home, and that's conditioned me in a weird way. I talk about death all the time. And to me, it's not weird. It's not morbid. It's not, you're going to die. You can not want to deal with that reality, but you're going to die. And most people die not how they planned, not on the timeline they were banking on, and having never accomplished most of the things that they thought they were going to do before they died. Again, you can deny that as reality. And I saw people do that my entire life. It's like, you're going to die, right? Like, no, I don't want to talk about that. You serious? Like, you think just by ignoring it, it's going to go away? It's not going to go away. And the same is true with this AI stuff. We're like in denial about this, about what's going on and what's going to happen and what AI can do. And it's like, I mean, it's here. It's not going back. It's not going away. It's not going to get better. The AI companies aren't going to suddenly grow a conscience and not be fueled by greed and politics and decide that, yeah, you know what, maybe we actually should focus on what's best for everyone at our expense. They're not going to do it. And so until you accept that as reality and not fly into a panic, you're not thinking clearly. Because then once you can accept that, you can think clearly and go, okay, well, if that's the world I live in, then I need to look in the mirror and figure out what I'm navigating. And is it going to be perfect? No, you're going to make tons of mistakes, but at least you can put one foot in front of the other and move forward. So there you go. That's my conclusion. So that's a wrap. I think if anything, McDonald's taught us, I think we should be encouraged. Human taste still matters. People still care about human creativity and human work. Altman reminded us, yeah, technology can support anything we do, but it can't replace the chaos and the critical thinking of what goes on in life. And FLI's safety index, it's a very potent reminder. Big tech does not have your best interest in mind. And the way we go is we got to keep our eyes on the road, not just the destination. And by the way, Alex, just before I sign off, I saw your comment, Technoblade. I'm very familiar with Technoblade. And yeah, I have a ton of respect. I get a little emotional even thinking about his whole story. He was a legend. And I have a lot of respect for what he did for the Minecraft community. And so in many ways, I chuckle at the Technoblade never dies type of a thing. So either way, if you're a leader and you're trying to navigate this stuff, whether it's AI, at your company, whether it's in your own life, check out my website, christopherlin.co. You can see some of the work I do. You can follow my content on whichever platform you're here, LinkedIn, YouTube, Substack, doesn't matter. And reach out. We can have a conversation. I love talking these things through and hopefully helping people make wise choices. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but my goal is to try and equip you to make wise decisions with whatever path you're walking on. So thanks for hanging out. This has been awesome in the comments. I've really enjoyed the dialogue. Live streaming is one of my favorite things to do. So have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend, and watch for my stuff on the safety index next week. With that, I will see you on the other side.